Backstep. Chapter 1 Arrival. The bus shuddered to a halt on a road that seemed to dissolve into the earth, its tires grinding against cobblestones slick with moss and a dark, viscous sheen that shimmered wrong under the dim sky. The engine coughed, a guttural death rattle that echoed through the stillness, and Elin Mauer clutched her satchel, its leather worn to a sheen from years of nervous gripping, its weight a lifeline in a world that felt ready to unravel. Inside, her tape recorder and her sister's journal, 10 years old, its pages brittle as ash, smelling of mildew and something sweeter, like decay, were the only things tethering her to a reality she could still name. Draemoor sprawled before her, a jagged wound of gray stone houses half swallowed by a fog so thick it pulsed like a heartbeat, its tendrils curling around rooftops, chimneys, and the skeletal remains of trees that leaned as if trying to escape. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and a metallic tang, sharp and fresh, like blood pooling in the shadows, stinging her nostrils with every breath. Elin was the only passenger to step off, her boots sinking into the mud with a wet, sucking sound that seemed to linger, and the driver didn't meet her eyes as he yanked the lever, the doors hissing shut with a sound like a whispered curse, sharp and final. "Last stop," he muttered, his voice flat, rough as gravel underfoot, his gaze fixed on the road as if it might vanish if he looked away. "Don't wander too far, girl. This place don't give back what it takes. Not ever. Not in one piece." Elin adjusted her scarf, her breath clouding in the October chill, her heart thudding against her ribs so hard it ached, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo the silence around her. "I'm here for research," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady, more to anchor herself than to convince him, the words feeling hollow even as they left her lips. "Folklore. Myth. That's all." The bus lurched away, its taillights swallowed by the fog in seconds, leaving her alone in a silence so deep it pressed against her eardrums, a weight that made her head throb, her pulse loud in her ears. No birds sang, no dogs barked. Only the faint creak of a shutter swinging somewhere in the haze, its rhythm uneven, like a heartbeat out of sync, each swing a warning she couldn't parse. Her phone showed no signal, the screen's glow feeble against the gray that seemed to leach color from everything, her coat, her hands, the world itself. The guidebook had warned her. Draemoor was a place where time stalled, where modernity was a ghost story told by outsiders who never stayed, who never saw what the fog hid. She hoisted her satchel, its strap cutting into her shoulder, and started toward the inn, a sagging building with a sign that read the backward glance in peeling paint, the letters slanting as if trying to slide off the wood, their edges frayed like a wound. The name sent a shiver down her spine, sharp and unplaceable, like a memory she hadn't lived yet, a warning carved into her bones. Inside, the innkeeper, a woman with eyes like chipped flint, cold and unyielding, and hands that moved too quickly, as if racing against an unseen clock, handed her a key without a word, her fingers brushing Elin's for a moment, cold as ice, lingering just long enough to make her skin crawl. The woman's gaze darted to Elin's satchel, lingered on the journal poking out, its leather cover soft as skin, then flicked away, as if she'd seen something she wished she hadn't, something that burned. The room was small, its walls papered in faded florals that seemed to writhe in the dim light, their patterns twisting into shapes, faces with hollow eyes, hands with too many fingers, mouths that whispered when she wasn't looking, that vanished when she stared directly at them. The single window overlooked a field shrouded in fog, its edges blurred, as if the world ended just beyond the glass, or refused to begin, the mist glowing faintly as if lit from within. She set her tape recorder on the rickety desk, its red light blinking like a wary eye, and pressed record, her fingers trembling, her throat tight. "October 12, 2025, she said, her voice steady despite the unease coiling in her chest like a snake, tightening with every breath, its scales cold against her heart. "Elin Mauer, folklore student, University of Uppsala. Arrived in Draemoor to research folkloric time reversal in remote Europe. Initial observations. Village is isolated, no modern technology, no cell signal, no sounds of life, birds, animals, nothing. Locals appear guarded, almost fearful, as if hiding something, as if watching me. The air smells wrong, metallic like blood, sharp and fresh. The fog feels alive, moving, watching. Tomorrow, I'll begin interviews about the myth of her turning grace, a figure mentioned in local stories and in Lila's notes. I need to understand what this place is, and what it did to my sister. She clicked off the recorder, her fingers lingering on the cold metal, the red light fading like a dying star, leaving her in darkness that felt too heavy, too close. She opened her sister's journal, the leather cover soft as skin, the pages yellowed and curling, their edges fraying like the edges of her own resolve, smelling of mildew and that sweet decay that clung to everything in Draemoor. 10 years ago, Lila had come here for her own research, chasing stories of spirits and curses that haunted the edges of Europe, her notebook filled with sketches of mirrors, backward walking figures, and cryptic phrases like "she turns because we turned away." Lila had vanished without a trace, leaving only a single note in her looping handwriting, found in her abandoned apartment in Uppsala. "I'm sorry, Elin. I can't face you anymore." The words were a knife in Elin's chest, a wound that bled every time she read them, a mystery that had driven her here, to this forgotten village where the fog seemed to watch her, its tendrils curling against the window like fingers searching for a way in. She traced the ink, her fingers trembling, her throat tight with tears she wouldn't let fall. "I'm here, Lila," she whispered, her voice breaking in the quiet, barely audible over the creak of the inn's floorboards, each sound a step closer to something she wasn't ready to face. "I'll find you. Promise. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs." The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the floral wallpaper seeming to pulse, the shadows shifting when she wasn't looking, their edges sharper as if they had teeth. She lay down, fully clothed, her satchel clutched to her chest like a shield, but sleep wouldn't come, refused to come. The silence was too loud, too alive, and every creak of the inn felt like a warning, a whisper from the fog outside, glowing faintly, as if lit by something that wasn't the moon. For a moment she thought she saw a shadow move beyond the glass, a figure, fleeting and wrong, walking backward into the mist, its head tilted as if listening, its form blurred but unmistakable, its presence heavy, inevitable. Chapter 2. The Backward Blessing. Morning brought no relief, no light to banish the fog that clung to the inn's windows, a living thing that pulsed and shifted, its tendrils curling against the glass like fingers searching for a crack, a weakness, a way in. Elin stepped outside, her boots crunching on gravel slick with dew that glistened red in the weak light, as if the earth were bleeding, its wounds open and raw. The air was colder now, biting at her exposed skin, and the metallic tang was stronger, sharp enough to make her eyes water, coating her tongue with every breath. She noticed something that made her pause, her breath catching in her throat. Every house in Draemoor had a mirror nailed above its door, facing outward, their surfaces watching the street like unblinking eyes. Some were cracked, their edges jagged as broken teeth, reflecting nothing but fragments of the fog. Others were smeared with grime, their surfaces dull but alive, rippling when she blinked, as if something moved behind them. All were angled to guard the village, as if waiting for an intruder who never came, or who was already here, walking unseen. She scribbled in her notebook, her handwriting unsteady, the pen shaking in her hand, ink smudging under her fingers. Mirrors as protective charms? Ritualistic warding against her turning grace? Fear-based superstition or something more? Something real? The village square was nearly deserted. The cobblestones uneven and stained with something dark that glistened like oil but smelled like blood, sharp and fresh, making her stomach twist. A group of children played near a dry fountain, its stone basin cracked and filled with moss that seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat trapped in the stone, its edges glowing in the dim light. Their laughter was wrong, clipped, disjointed, as if the sound were being pulled backward through time, each note landing in reverse, each giggle a shard of glass in her ears. Elin approached, her smile practiced but brittle, her heart thudding in her chest, her palms sweating despite the cold, her breath shallow. "Hello," she said, kneeling to their level, her voice softer than she intended, trembling with an unease she couldn't name. "I'm Elin. I'm studying stories about this place. Do you know any?" The children froze, their eyes wide and unblinking, like glass marbles catching the light, their faces pale as bone, their lips still as if sewn shut. A girl with braids, no older than 10, stepped forward, her movements slow, deliberate, her feet barely touching the ground, as if she were floating, her shadow facing the wrong way. Her voice was high and eerie, the words tumbling out in reverse cadence, each syllable landing like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through Elin's mind, pulling at her thoughts. "Grace to turn to grace," she chanted, her gaze piercing, her eyes seeming to see through Elin, past her, into something deeper, something hidden. "Never look upon her face." Elin's smile faltered, a chill crawling up her spine like fingers, cold and relentless, her throat tightening, her breath shallow. "Who's Grace?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands clenching her notebook so tightly her knuckles whitened, the paper crumpling under her grip. The girl tilted her head, her braids swaying like pendulums, her lips curling into a smile that was too old for her face, too knowing, as if she carried secrets no child should know, secrets that burned. "Her turning Grace," she said, her voice dropping, the words slanting backward, each one a needle in Elin's skull, sharp and unyielding. "She walks backward. Always backward. She doesn't come for you. You go to her. If you see her, you're already gone. She takes you where you don't belong, where you can't come back." The other children giggled, but it wasn't joyful. It was the sound of glass splintering, of bones grinding together, of something breaking beneath the surface, a sound that made Elin's skin crawl, her stomach twist, her heart pound so hard she felt it in her throat. She forced a laugh, her throat so tight she could barely breathe, her hands trembling as she gripped her notebook, the pen slipping from her fingers, its ink staining her hand like blood. "That's a good story," she said, her voice cracking, her eyes darting to the children, their faces blurring for a moment, their eyes too large, their mouths too wide. "Where did you hear it?" The girl didn't answer. She turned and ran, her footsteps muted, as if the ground swallowed the sound before it could echo, her braids swinging in reverse, as if time itself were pulling her back, her shadow trailing ahead of her, wrong and alive. The others followed, their voices fading into the fog, a haunting refrain that seemed to linger in the air, echoing in Elin's skull. "Never look upon her face." Elin stood, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat, her vision swimming, her breath shallow. She clicked on her recorder, her voice trembling, barely audible, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the button. Note: local children recite a rhyme about her turning Grace. Likely a regional specter tied to the mirror ritual. Protective mirrors suggest a belief in reflective warding, possibly to deflect her gaze or presence. The children's behavior, reverse speech, muted footsteps, wrong shadows, indicates a deeper cultural or supernatural influence. Their eyes, they didn't look human. Need to find primary sources, villagers, records, anything to explain this. She spent the day knocking on doors, her questions met with silence, suspicion, or outright hostility, the villagers' faces pale and drawn, their eyes darting to the mirrors above their thresholds, their hands clutching doorframes as if to anchor themselves to reality, as if they might slip away if they let go. One old woman, her hands gnarled as tree roots, her face etched with lines like cracks in stone, hissed through a crack in her door. "Don't go looking for her. She'll find you first. And when she does, you won't come back. No one does." Her voice was sharp, her eyes wild, glowing with a fear that seemed to burn, her breath smelling of decay. And when Elin pressed for more, the door slammed shut, the mirror above it rattling like a warning, its surface rippling for a moment, as if something moved behind it, a shadow that wasn't hers. By dusk, her notebook was filled with fragments. Mirrors, reverse speech, her turning grace, fear of looking, warnings of disappearance, shadows that don't match. Draemoor felt like a puzzle with half its pieces missing. The other half warped into something unrecognizable, something that didn't fit together, something that cut when you tried to hold it. The fog thickened as she returned to the inn, the air heavy with that metallic tang, now unmistakable as blood, sharp and fresh, as if the village itself were bleeding, its wounds open and raw, seeping into the earth, the sky, her lungs. She quickened her pace, her breath hitching, her eyes scanning the street, the fog seeming to shift, as if something moved within it. A shadow, fleeting and wrong, walking backward, its form blurred but unmistakable, its head tilted as if listening, its presence heavy, inevitable. She reached the inn and locked the door behind her, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the key, its clatter echoing in the silent room, louder than it should have been, sharp as a scream. The floral wallpaper seemed to pulse, the shadows shifting when she wasn't looking, their edges sharper, as if they had teeth, as if they were hungry. The air felt colder, heavier, as if the fog had followed her inside, its tendrils curling around her ankles, her wrists, her throat. She checked the window, half expecting to see a figure outside. But there was only fog, thick and endless, glowing faintly as if lit from within, its surface rippling like water, like a mirror. She sat on the bed, her satchel clutched to her chest, and opened Lila's journal again, its pages trembling in her hands. The words "I can't face you anymore" stared back at her, and for the first time, she wondered if her sister had meant them literally. Not an apology but a warning, a description of something she'd seen, something that had changed her, turned her, taken her where Elin couldn't follow. Chapter 3: Footsteps in Reverse. That night, sleep was a ghost that refused to visit, a shadow that slipped away when Elin reached for it. The inn was too quiet, the silence a weight that pressed against her eardrums, making her head throb, her pulse loud in her ears, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo something else, something older. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows twisting into shapes, faces with hollow eyes, hands with too many fingers, mouths that whispered words she couldn't hear, that vanished when she looked directly at them, leaving only the floral wallpaper, its patterns pulsing faintly as if alive. Lila's journal lay open on her chest, its pages glowing in the moonlight that seeped through the fog, the words "I can't face you anymore" looping in her mind like a curse, each repetition sharper, more accusing, more desperate. Then she heard it. Click, click, click. Footsteps slow and deliberate, like heels striking stone, echoing through the stillness of the night, cutting through the silence like a blade. But the rhythm was wrong. Each step sounded like it was retreating, not approaching, as if someone were walking backward past her window, their heels dragging in reverse, their presence pulling at the air, at time itself. The sound was faint but unmistakable, a cadence that defied logic, each click a thread unraveling her nerves, threatening to undo her entirely. Elin sat up, her breath catching in her throat, her heart pounding so hard it ached, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo the footsteps, to sync with them, to pull her toward them. She grabbed her flashlight, its beam trembling as she aimed it at the window, the glass fogged with condensation, the street beyond swallowed by a wall of gray mist that seemed to pulse, to breathe. Click, click, click. The sound stopped abruptly, as if the walker had paused just beyond the wall, close enough to touch, close enough to hear her breathing, her heartbeat, her fear. Elin's skin prickled, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears, her mouth dry as ash, her tongue sticking to the roof of her mouth. She crept to the door, her hand shaking on the knob, her breath shallow, each inhale tasting of that metallic tang, now so strong it coated her tongue, her lungs choking her. The hallway was dark, the air heavy with the smell of damp wood and something sour, like decay, like something left to rot in the shadows, something that had once been alive. She stepped outside, her flashlight cutting through the fog, its beam weak and flickering like a candle about to gutter. But the street was empty. No figure, no footprints, only the oppressive silence that seemed to hum with a life of its own. A low vibration that crawled up her spine into her skull, settling behind her eyes. Back in her room, she locked the door, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the flashlight, its beam spinning wildly across the room, illuminating the floral wallpaper, its patterns twisting into faces that weren't there, mouths that whispered when she blinked. She checked the window again, her breath fogging the glass, but the street was still empty, the fog thicker now, pressing against the glass like a living thing, its tendrils curling as if trying to slip inside, as if searching for her. She was about to turn away when her flashlight caught something on the floor. Muddy footprints, smudged and wet, leading from the door to the foot of her bed. They were small, delicate, like a woman's, their edges sharp as if freshly made. The mud glistening red in the light, as if mixed with blood, as if the earth itself had bled into her room. But there were no prints leading away. The trail simply stopped, as if whoever had made them had vanished into the air. Or was still there, invisible, watching, waiting, breathing just behind her. Elin's heart lurched, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps, her vision swimming, her knees buckling. She stumbled back, her flashlight clattering to the floor, its beam spinning wildly, illuminating the footprints in flashes, their edges seeming to pulse, as if alive, as if breathing, as if growing. She grabbed her recorder, her voice barely a whisper, cracking with fear, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the button. The red light blinking like a warning, like a heartbeat. October 13th, 2025. Footprints in my room. They stop at my bed. No exit trail. I heard footsteps outside, reversed like someone walking backward. The mud, it looks like blood, smells like blood. I don't know what this means. I don't know what's happening. Lila, what did you see? She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the bed, her back against the wall, her flashlight aimed at the footprints, as if they might move, as if they might grow, as if they might reach for her. The journal lay open beside her, Lila's words burning in her mind, sharper now, more urgent. I can't face you anymore. She clutched the book to her chest, her eyes darting to the window, half expecting to see a face, Lila's or something worse, staring back at her, its eyes where its mouth should be, its mouth where its eyes should be. The fog glowed faintly, as if lit from within, and the silence was no longer empty. It was waiting, listening, and the click, click, click of the footsteps lingered in her mind, a rhythm that refused to fade, a rhythm that seemed to pull at her soul, urging her to follow. Chapter 4. Isaac's Studio. The next morning, Elin followed a tip from the innkeeper to a crumbling cottage on the edge of Draemoor, where the forest loomed like a wall of twisted branches, their shadows clawing at the ground, their leaves glistening with dew that looked too red, too alive, as if the trees were bleeding. The cottage belonged to Isaac Vale, a painter who, according to the innkeeper, sees things he shouldn't and paints what he sees, whether he wants to or not, whether he survives it or not. Ivy strangled the stone walls, its leaves curling like fingers, their edges sharp as if they could cut, and the windows were dark, streaked with grime that seemed to pulse in the weak light, as if alive, as if breathing. A single mirror hung above the door, its surface so tarnished it reflected nothing but a dull smear of the world, its edges cracked like a broken promise, its frame stained with something that wasn't rust, wasn't paint, but something worse. Elin knocked, the sound swallowed by the fog, her heart thudding in her chest, her palms sweating despite the cold, her breath shallow, each inhale tasting of blood. The door creaked open, revealing a man, tall, gaunt, his hands stained with paint the color of rust and blood, his fingers twitching as if they were never still, as if they were alive with their own will. His eyes were bloodshot, sunken, as if sleep were a memory he'd buried long ago, and his hair was a tangle of gray, though he couldn't have been older than 40, his face pale and drawn, his lips twitching, as if fighting a smile or a scream or something in between. His presence was heavy, like the fog, like the village, like the thing that walked backward through it. "You're the student," he said, his voice low, rough like sandpaper on bone. Not a question but a statement, as if he'd been expecting her, as if he'd seen her coming in a dream or a canvas. "Heard you were poking around, asking questions you shouldn't. Questions that bring trouble. Questions that bring her." "I'm Elin Mauer," she said, offering a hand he didn't take, her voice steadier than she felt, though her heart pounded so hard she thought he could hear it, feel it, taste it. "I'm researching local folklore. The innkeeper said you might know something about her." Turning Grace. Isaac's face twitched, a shadow passing over his features like a storm cloud over a field, his eyes darting to the mirror above the door, then back to her, sharp and wary, glowing with something like fear or recognition or both. "Come in," he said, stepping aside, his voice barely above a whisper, heavy with a weight she couldn't name, his hand lingering on the doorframe as if to anchor himself, as if he might slip away if he let go. "But don't expect answers you'll like. And don't touch anything. Things here, they don't stay still. They don't stay safe." The cottage was a labyrinth of canvases, each one more unsettling than the last, lining the walls, leaning against tables, spilling onto the floor in a chaotic sprawl that seemed to breathe, to pulse. They depicted Draemoor in excruciating detail, the crooked houses, their roofs sagging like broken spines, their windows dark and watching, the fog-choked fields, their grass twisted and wrong, their edges bleeding into the mist, the pale field under a moon that was too large, too close, its light bleeding into the fog, turning it red, turning it alive. But every brushstroke was reversed, the paint trailing backward as if pulled against its will, the images seeming to unravel as Elin looked at them, as if they were trying to erase themselves, to hide from her gaze. One canvas stood out, larger than the rest, dominating the room like a wound. A woman walking through a field, her back to the viewer, her form blurred and wrong, her dress tattered as if caught in a wind that blew the wrong way, its fabric stained with something that wasn't mud, wasn't blood, but something worse. Her head was tilted, as if listening, and the fog around her seemed to pulse, alive, its tendrils curling like hands reaching out, like mouths whispering. Elin's breath caught, her fingers tightening around her notebook, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat, her mouth dry as ash, her tongue sticking to the roof of her mouth. "Why do you paint like this?" she asked, her voice soft, almost afraid to break the silence, her eyes fixed on the canvas, unable to look away, the figure seeming to move, to shift when she blinked. Isaac stared at the canvas, his eyes distant, his voice hollow, barely audible, as if it came from somewhere else. From the fog, from the field, from the thing that walked backward. "Because she never shows you where she's going. Only where she's been. You paint what you see or it paints you. It paints you wrong." "Who is she?" Elin pressed, her pulse quickening, her hands trembling as she gripped her pen, the ink smudging under her fingers, staining her hand like blood. Her turning Grace. "What is she? What does she want?" He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a brush, his movements jerky, almost mechanical, as if his hands were no longer his own, as if they belonged to the canvas, to the fog, to her. He began painting on a fresh canvas, the strokes forming a figure, faceless, walking backward, her dress trailing through mist that seemed to writhe under his brush, alive and hungry, its edges curling like fingers, like teeth. Elin's stomach twisted, a cold dread settling in her bones, heavy as lead, her breath shallow, her vision swimming. "Have you seen her?" she asked, her voice cracking, her eyes fixed on the canvas, where the figure seemed to move, its head tilting further, as if looking at her, its presence heavy, inevitable. Isaac's brush froze, the paint dripping upward, defying gravity, pooling in the air before vanishing, like blood flowing backward, like time unraveling. "More than once," he whispered, his voice so low it seemed to come from the walls, From the fog outside, from the canvas itself, from the thing that walked backward. First time I was 16. Thought I could outrun her, thought I was smarter than the others. Followed her into the pale field, thought I'd come back a hero. Came back wrong. Second time I was 25. Tried to paint her face, thought I could trap her on the canvas, thought I could make her stop. Both times I came back, but not whole. His eyes met hers, sharp and haunted, cutting through the dim light like a blade, glowing with a terror that wasn't his own. I'm still here. That's more than most can say. More than your sister can say. Elin's breath caught, her heart stopping for a moment, the room spinning, the air too thick to breathe. You knew Lila? She asked, her voice trembling, her hands clenching into fists, her nails digging into her palms, drawing blood that felt too cold, too wrong. What happened to her? Isaac's lips twitched, not a smile but something worse, something broken. Something that had seen too much and survived too little. She came here just like you, asked the same questions, followed the same footsteps. She saw her too, and she didn't come back. Not as Lila, not as anything you'd recognize. What does she want? Elin's voice was barely a whisper, her throat tight, tears stinging her eyes, her hands shaking so badly her pen fell to the floor, its clatter echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. What did she do to Lila? Isaac's gaze drifted to the canvas, his fingers tightening around the brush, his knuckles white, his hand trembling. She doesn't want anything. She just walks. And if you follow her, he trailed off, his eyes glazing over, as if seeing something beyond the room, beyond the world, beyond time itself. You don't come back the same. No one does. Not me. Not Lila. Not you if you keep going. And you will. You're already too far. Elin's throat tightened, her mind racing with questions she was too afraid to ask, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, her vision swimming. She glanced at the canvas again, and for a moment she thought the figure moved, its head tilting further, its form sharpening, as if stepping out of the paint, as if stepping into the room. She blinked and the image was still, but the dread in her chest grew heavier, a weight that threatened to crush her, to pull her under, to turn her. She stumbled out of the cottage, Isaac's words echoing in her mind like a warning she couldn't heed, a curse she couldn't escape, her breath ragged, her hands trembling. The fog was thicker now, the air colder, the metallic scent sharper, as if the village itself were bleeding, its wounds open and raw, seeping into the earth, the sky, her lungs. She glanced back at the cottage, and through the grimy window she saw Isaac painting, his brush moving in reverse, his face pale and drawn, his eyes fixed on something she couldn't see, something that wasn't there, or was but only for him. For a moment she thought she saw another figure behind him, walking backward, vanishing into the shadows of the room, its dress trailing like a wound in the air, its head tilted as if listening, its presence heavy, inevitable, eternal. Chapter 5. The First Turned 1. Elin spent the next day in the village archives, a damp basement beneath the church that smelled of mold, old paper, and something sour, like meat left to rot in the dark, the scent clinging to her skin, her clothes, her lungs. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against her chest, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast shadows that seemed to move when she wasn't looking, their edges blurring into shapes, faces with hollow eyes, hands with too many fingers, mouths that whispered words she couldn't hear, that vanished when she turned, leaving only the hum of the lights, erratic and wrong, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Father Grain had reluctantly given her access, his eyes wary, his hands clutching a rosary so tightly his knuckles were white, his breath smelling of whiskey and despair, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. Don't dig too deep, he'd warned, his gaze darting to the shadows as if they might listen, as if they might speak. Some things are better left buried, girl. Some truths don't let you go. They take you instead. The archives were a labyrinth of crumbling records, shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten lives, their pages yellowed and brittle, their ink fading like memories slipping away, their words sharp as knives when she read them. Dust coated everything, stinging her eyes, settling in her throat, making her cough, the sound echoing in the silent basement, louder than it should have been, as if the room were listening, waiting. She found what she was looking for in a file from 1954. Its pages crumbling under her touch, the ink smudged but legible, each word a weight that pressed against her chest, stealing her breath. It detailed the disappearance of Hans Kroll, a farmer well-liked by the village, a man known for his laughter, his strength, his ability to make even the grayest days feel warm, his voice a beacon in the fog. He'd vanished during the autumn fog, leaving behind a wife and 2 children who never spoke of him again, their eyes hollow, their faces turned away whenever his name was mentioned, as if saying it might summon something they couldn't face. His body was found a week later in the Pale Field, a barren stretch of land beyond the forest where nothing grew, where the air felt heavier, as if time itself were trapped, unable to move forward, unable to escape. The coroner's report was clinical, detached, but the words hit Elin like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs, making her vision swim. Cause of death: reverse asphyxiation. Subject's head twisted 180 degrees, spine severed at C3-C4. No signs of external trauma. Body found standing upright, facing backward, eyes open, expression fixed in terror, pupils dilated, corneas clouded as if burned. A photograph was clipped to the file, grainy and faded, showing Hans's body in the field, its edges curling like a hand reaching out. His head was wrong, twisted backward, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to seep from the image, his mouth open in a silent scream that echoed in Elin's mind, loud enough to drown out her own thoughts. His hands were outstretched, fingers curled as if clawing at something only he could see, something that had taken him and left him broken, turned wrong. Elin's hands shook as she turned the page, her breath ragged, her heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat, her mouth dry as ash, her tongue sticking to the roof of her mouth. Another note, scrawled in a different hand, read: Witnesses report seeing a woman walking backward in the field the night Kroll disappeared. No identification. No trace. Body showed no signs of struggle, as if subject turned willingly. Wife reported hearing reverse footsteps outside their home the night prior, accompanied by a voice whispering backward, unintelligible but human. The word willingly burned in her mind, a question she couldn't answer, a fear she couldn't shake, a truth she wasn't ready to face. She slammed the file shut, her vision blurring, tears stinging her eyes, the air in the basement suddenly too thick to breathe, the shadows pressing closer, their edges sharper, as if they had teeth, as if they were hungry, as if they knew her name. She stumbled to her feet, knocking over a stack of papers, their edges curling like dead leaves, their words blurring into nonsense, their ink smudging under her hands, staining her skin like blood. The basement seemed smaller now, the walls closing in, the fluorescent lights flickering faster, casting shadows that danced like figures walking backward, their heads tilted, their eyes where their mouths should be. She ran from the archives, her boots echoing on the stone steps, the sound reversing in her ears, click, 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 pulling at her mind, unraveling it. The air outside was no less oppressive, the fog thicker, the metallic tang stronger, as if the village were bleeding into the sky, its wounds open and raw, seeping into her lungs, her soul. That night she dreamed of Hans. He stood in the pale field, his head twisted, his eyes locked on hers, his mouth moving in reverse, each word a guttural inversion that scraped against her skull, clawing at her mind, pulling at her thoughts. She saw. "I," he whispered, his voice a tape played backward, the sound sharp and unyielding, like glass shattering in slow motion. His fingers twitched, reaching for her, his nails black with something that wasn't mud, wasn't blood, but something worse, something alive, his eyes glowing with a terror that wasn't his own, a terror that knew her name. She woke with a scream, her sheets soaked with sweat. The journal clutched to her chest like a shield. Her heart pounding so hard it hurt, her breath ragged, her vision swimming. The room was dark, but the fog outside glowed faintly, as if lit from within, and for a moment, she thought she heard footsteps. Click, click, click. Reversing through the walls, through her mind, a rhythm that refused to stop, a rhythm that called her name. Chapter 6, Mirror Witness. The next evening, Elin couldn't stay away, couldn't fight the compulsion that drove her to the pale field. A pull stronger than fear, stronger than reason. A force that felt like fate, like guilt, like Lila. Her boots sank into the muddy earth, each step heavier, as if the ground were pulling her down, claiming her, marking her. The fog was thicker here, a wall of white that seemed to breathe, its tendrils curling around her ankles, her wrists, her throat, cold and alive, pulling at her, slowing her, whispering her name. The air was heavy with that metallic tang, now unmistakable as blood, sharp and fresh, like a wound that wouldn't close, coating her tongue, her lungs, choking her with every breath. She carried a pocket mirror, a childhood habit from when Lila had taught her to check the corners of the world. A game they played to chase away shadows, to laugh at the dark, their giggles echoing in a world that still made sense. Now the mirror felt like a weapon, its surface cold against her palm, its edges sharp enough to cut, its weight heavier than it should have been, as if it carried something inside it, something watching. She held it up, angling it toward the field, her hands trembling, her breath shallow, her heart pounding against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo the fog, the field, the thing that walked through it. And there she was, her turning grace, walking backward through the mist, her dress tattered, its edges fraying like smoke, its fabric stained with something dark that glistened in the moonlight, something that wasn't mud, wasn't blood, but something worse, something alive. Her movements were smooth but unnatural, like a film played in reverse, each step deliberate, precise, as if retracing a path carved into time itself, a path that led nowhere or everywhere or to her. Her head was tilted, her face obscured by shadow, as if the light refused to touch her, as if the world itself were afraid, as if reality bent around her, unwilling to acknowledge her existence. Elin's heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat, her fingers tightening around the mirror, the glass digging into her skin, drawing blood that felt too cold, too wrong. She turned to look at the field in real life, her flashlight shaking in her other hand, its beam weak and flickering, but the field was empty, the grass still under the moonlight, undisturbed, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting for her to make a mistake, to cross a line she couldn't uncross. She looked back at the mirror. The woman was closer now, her steps deliberate, each one pulling Elin's gaze deeper into the reflection, as if the mirror were a door, an invitation, a trap, its surface rippling like water, like blood. Her form was sharper, more real, but her face remained hidden, a void that seemed to swallow the light, the air, the world, a void that knew her name. Elin's hand shook, her pulse a frantic rhythm, her vision swimming, but she couldn't look away, couldn't break the gaze that wasn't there, the gaze that burned. The woman's head tilted further, and for a moment Elin thought she saw eyes, wrong, inverted, where a mouth should be, glowing with a light that wasn't there. A light that burned, that saw her, that knew her, that wanted her. "Don't turn to see her," Father Grain's voice echoed in her mind, his warning from the archives, his breath heavy with whiskey and fear, his eyes wild with something like guilt, like shame, like a secret he couldn't confess. "She only walks backward to drag you back with her, to where you can't come back." Elin snapped the mirror shut, the sound sharp in the silence like a bone breaking, her chest heaving, her vision blurring, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She ran, her boots slipping on the wet ground, the fog chasing her like a tide, its tendrils curling around her, pulling at her, slowing her, whispering her name, Lila's name, Hans's name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. She reached the inn and locked the door, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the key, its clatter echoing in the silent room. louder than it should have been, sharp as a scream, sharp as the click, click, click that followed her. The footsteps were there, reversing through the walls, through her skull, a rhythm that seemed to pull at her mind, unraveling it, twisting it backward, turning it wrong. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound was inside her now, a pulse that matched her own heartbeat, only backward, each beat a step closer to something she couldn't name, something she wasn't ready to face. She stumbled to the bed, her satchel clutched to her chest, and opened Lila's journal, her hands trembling so badly the pages tore, their edges fraying like her own resolve, their ink smudging under her fingers, staining her skin like blood. The words "I can't face you anymore" glowed in the moonlight, sharper now, more urgent, and for the first time Elin wondered if her sister had seen the same figure, felt the same pull, and followed it into the fog, into a place where time didn't work, where nothing came back the same, where faces weren't faces, where eyes weren't eyes. Chapter 7. Letters from her sister. The next morning Elin found an envelope slipped under her door, its presence a violation, a wound in the fabric of her reality. It was unmarked, the paper yellowed like her sister's journal, its edges curling as if it had been buried in damp earth, its surface stained with something dark that smelled of blood, sharp and fresh, clinging to her fingers when she touched it. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her breath catching in her throat, her heart pounding against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo the fog, the village, the thing that walked through it. The handwriting was Lila's, unmistakable but wrong, the letters slanting backward, as if written by a hand that didn't know time, each stroke a wound in the paper, each word a shard in Elin's mind. "Elin, sorry her toward walked I, her saw I. Any more you face can't I." The words hit like a blow, stealing the air from her lungs, her vision blurring with tears, her knees buckling. She sank to the floor, the letter clutched in her hands, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, her throat tight with a scream she couldn't release, her breath ragged, her chest heaving. "Lila," she whispered, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face, soaking the paper, smudging the ink, making the words bleed, making them alive. "What did you do? What did she do to you? Why didn't you come back?" She stumbled to the archives, her mind a storm of questions, the letter burning in her pocket, its weight heavier than it should have been, as if it carried something inside it, something watching, something waiting. Father Grain was there, polishing a candelabra, its silver gleaming like a blade in the dim light, his hands moving in slow, deliberate strokes, as if trying to erase something he couldn't forget, as if trying to cleanse himself of something that wouldn't let go. He didn't turn as she entered, but his voice cut through the silence, low and heavy, like a stone sinking into deep water, like a confession he couldn't hold back. "You got the letter," he said, his shoulders sagging, the candelabra clattering softly as he set it down, his hands trembling, his fingers stained with something that wasn't polish, wasn't paint, but something worse. Elin froze, her heart lurching, her hands clenching into fists, her nails digging into her palms, drawing blood that felt too cold, too wrong. "You knew," she demanded, her voice sharp, trembling with anger and fear. The letter crumpled in her hand, its edges tearing, its words bleeding. "How did you know? What is this?" The priest turned, his eyes hollow, his face etched with lines that seemed to deepen as he spoke, as if age were carving him in real time, as if the village itself were aging him, consuming him. "Everyone who comes looking for her gets one," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, cracking with something like sorrow, like guilt, like a wound that wouldn't heal. "It's her way of warning you, or luring you. No one knows which. Not until it's too late. Not until you follow." "Who is she?" Elin shouted, stepping closer, her voice echoing in the silent basement, the shadows pressing closer, their edges sharper, as if they had teeth, as if they knew her name. "What happened to my sister? What is her turning grace? Tell me." Father Grain's hands trembled, the rosary slipping from his fingers, its beads scattering across the floor like seeds, each one glinting in the dim light, each one a prayer that had failed. "Her turning grace is what we made her," he said, his voice trembling, his eyes fixed on the letter as if it were a curse, a wound, a truth he couldn't face. "A mirror for our guilt. A punishment for looking away. We turned our backs, and now she turns us one by one until we face what we did. What does that mean?" Elin's voice rose, sharp with desperation, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the letter, its pages fluttering to the floor, the backward words glowing in the dim light, alive and hungry. "What did you do to her? To Lila? Tell me, or I'll." The priest's lips moved, a silent prayer, the words reversed, a chant that made her skin crawl, her stomach twist, her mind unravel. "Ikartnox se non sum soif." He shook his head, his eyes wild, glowing with something like fear, like shame, like a secret he'd buried too deep to dig up. "Ask Isaac," he said, his voice barely audible, his hands clutching the candelabra as if it could save him, as if it could keep her away. "He's seen her face. He knows more than I do, more than he'll ever tell, unless you make him." Elin's chest tightened, her breath coming in short gasps, her vision swimming, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She grabbed the letter and ran, the priest's words echoing in her mind, the fog outside seeming to pulse with a life of its own, its tendrils curling around her, pulling at her, whispering her name, Lila's name, Hans's name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. She didn't know what she was running toward, Isaac, answers, or something far worse, but she couldn't stop, her legs moving of their own accord, her heart a drumbeat in her chest, the letter burning in her hand like a brand, like a curse, like a promise she couldn't break. Chapter 8, Turned Village. Elin returned to the archives that afternoon, driven by a need to understand, to piece together the fragments of Draemoor's secrets, to find Lila in the cracks of the village's history, to pull her back from wherever she'd gone. The basement was colder now, the air thicker, the shadows deeper, as if the room itself were closing in, its walls breathing, its floor pulsing under her feet, its silence alive and hungry. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like figures walking backward, their heads tilted, their eyes where their mouths should be, their mouths where their eyes should be, whispering words she couldn't hear, words that pulled at her mind, unraveling it. She found more records, journal entries from the 1800s, written in spidery script, their pages crumbling under her touch, their words sharp as knives, cutting deeper with every line. One entry, dated 1847, described a woman named Ilara who'd vanished after following a figure into the fog, her screams echoing backward through the night, sharp and wrong, like a tape played in reverse. Her family was found days later, their heads twisted, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies moving in reverse, as if trapped in a mirror of reality, their footsteps leaving no trace, their shadows facing the wrong way. Another record from 1901 listed names of the turned. Dozens, maybe hundreds, their fate sealed by a single phrase. Followed her into the pale. A photograph from 1923 chilled her to the bone, its edges curling like dead leaves, its image grainy but sharp, too sharp, as if it wanted to be seen, to be known. It showed a group of villagers, their bodies blurred, their heads twisted at impossible angles, their faces smeared into something inhuman, their eyes glowing with a terror that seemed to seep from the paper, to reach for her, to pull her in. The caption, scrawled in faded ink, read, "The Turning 1923. May God forgive us." Elin's mind raced, her fingers trembling as she turned the pages, her heart pounding against her ribs, her breath shallow, her vision swimming. The villagers weren't just afraid of her turning grace. They were complicit, their fear rooted in guilt, in a sin so terrible it had birthed a curse that walked backward through time, turning those who saw it, trapping them in a reality that moved the wrong way, that broke them apart. She found another record, a ledger from 1876, its pages stained with something dark that smelled of blood, listing rituals, mirrors placed in circles, chants spoken backward, offerings left in the pale field to appease her, to keep her walking, to keep her away. The final entry read, "We cannot undo what we did. She walks because we turned away. She turns because we refused to see. She is our mirror, our guilt, our end." Elin's vision blurred, tears stinging her eyes, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the ledger, its pages scattering across the floor, their words blurring into nonsense, their ink smudging under her hands, staining her skin like blood, like a mark she couldn't wash away. The basement seemed smaller now, the walls closing in, the shadows sharper, as if they had teeth, as if they were hungry, as if they knew her name, her sins, her fears. She confronted Father Grain that night, slamming the photograph on his desk, her hands trembling with anger and fear, her voice echoing in the silent church, the stained glass windows glowing faintly in the moonlight, their colors bleeding into each other, wrong and alive, their figures twisted, their eyes watching. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice sharp, cracking with desperation, the photograph trembling under her hand, the faces in it seeming to move, to watch her, to whisper her name. "What did this village do to her? To Lila? Tell me, or I'll dig until I find it, until I tear this place apart." The priest's hand shook, his eyes fixed on the photograph, his face pale as bone, his lips trembling, his breath smelling of whiskey and despair. "We looked away," he said, his voice barely audible, cracking with something like shame, like guilt, like a wound that wouldn't heal, like a confession he couldn't hold back. "When she needed us most, we turned our backs. We let her die, and now she turns us one by one until we face what we did. Until we see her face. Tell me," Elin shouted, her fists slamming the desk, the photograph sliding to the floor, its edges curling like a hand reaching out, its faces shifting, their eyes glowing, their mouths moving in reverse. "Who was she? What did you do to her? What happened to my sister?" But Father Grain only shook his head, his lips moving in a silent prayer, the words reversed, a chant that made her skin crawl, her stomach twist, her mind unravel. "Ikartnoxt se non sum soif." The air grew colder, the shadows longer, the stained glass windows pulsing with a light that wasn't there, their figures twisting, their eyes where their mouths should be, their mouths where their eyes should be, whispering her name, Lila's name, Hans's name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. Elin felt a pull, a compulsion to run, to find Isaac, to demand answers he might not want to give, to face whatever truth the village had buried in the fog, in the mirrors, in the field that waited beyond the forest. Chapter 9. The Ceremony of Fog. That night the village held its yearly ritual, a spectacle that felt like a wound in the fabric of reality, a tear that bled fog and fear and something worse. Elin watched from the shadows of an alley, her recorder clutched in her hand, its red light blinking like a heartbeat, her own pulse pounding against her ribs, her breath shallow, her hands trembling. The villagers gathered in the square, their faces pale under flickering lanterns, their breath clouding in the cold, their eyes darting to the mirrors above their doors, their hands trembling as if they could feel the weight of their own guilt, their own sins, their own end. They placed mirrors in a circle, their surfaces reflecting the fog, creating a kaleidoscope of distorted images. Faces that weren't there, shapes that moved when they shouldn't, eyes that glowed with a light that wasn't human, mouths that whispered words she couldn't hear, words that pulled at her mind, unraveling it. Father Grain stood at the center, his robe swaying in a wind that didn't exist, his voice rising in a chant, Latin but spoken backward, the syllables twisting into something guttural and wrong, like a language from a world that didn't belong, a world that shouldn't exist. Ikartnoxt se non sum soif, tnamatsta sutatsta. The words clawed at Elin's mind, pulling at her thoughts, unraveling them like thread, each syllable a needle in her skull, sharp and unyielding, drawing blood she couldn't see, blood she could feel. She clicked on her recorder, but the tape hissed and rewound, the words warping into static, a high eerie voice breaking through, the voice of the girl from the square, her chant looping in reverse, sharper now, more urgent, more desperate. Never look upon her face? The sound was sharp, piercing, and it seemed to come from everywhere. The fog, the mirrors, the air itself, the ground beneath her feet, pulling at her, urging her to step closer, to join the ritual, to see what they saw, to know what they feared. Her heart pounded, her hands trembling as she backed away, the fog thickening around her, its tendrils curling around her ankles, her wrists, her throat, cold and alive, pulling at her like hands, like mouths, like eyes that saw too much. The chant grew louder, a chorus of reverse syllables that seemed to pull at her soul, urging her to step into the circle, to become part of it, to become what they were, guilty, turned, lost. The mirrors glowed faintly, their surfaces rippling like water, like blood, and for a moment, Elin saw a figure in one, walking backward, her dress trailing through the fog, her head tilted as if listening, her form blurred but unmistakable, her presence heavy, inevitable, eternal. She ran, her boots slipping on the cobblestones, the fog chasing her like a tide, its weight pressing against her chest, slowing her, pulling her back, whispering her name, Lila's name, Hans's name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. She locked herself in her room, her breath ragged, her hands shaking as she clutched the recorder, its tape still hissing, the girl's voice looping in reverse, sharper now, more urgent, more desperate. Never look upon her face? The chant followed, seeping through the walls, the words twisting in her mind, her thoughts unraveling like thread, her vision swimming, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She checked the window, half expecting to see the figure from the mirror. But there was only fog, thick and endless, glowing faintly as if lit from within, its tendrils curling against the glass, searching for a way in, whispering her name, Lila's name, the names of everyone who'd gone before her. Chapter 10. Caught in her path. The next night, Elin couldn't resist, couldn't fight the compulsion that drove her to the forest, the footsteps calling her. Click, click, click. Reversing through the fog, a siren song that pulled at her soul, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, only backward, each beat a step closer to something she couldn't name, something she wasn't ready to face. She followed, her flashlight flickering, its beam weak against the mist, her heart pounding against her ribs, her breath shallow, her hands trembling, her fingers numb with cold, with fear, with something worse. The trees loomed, their branches clawing at the sky, their shadows facing the wrong way, as if the light itself were confused, as if the world were turning backward, unraveling at its seams. The air was thick with the smell of blood, sharp and fresh, coating her tongue, her lungs, choking her with every breath, drowning her in a tide she couldn't escape. And there she was, her turning grace, walking backward, her dress trailing through the mist like a shroud, its fabric stained with something dark that glistened in the moonlight, something that wasn't mud, wasn't blood, but something worse, something alive, something that pulsed. Her movements were smooth, deliberate, each step a pull on Elin's soul, a rhythm that matched the footsteps, the click, click, click echoing in her skull, through her bones, through her blood. Her head was tilted, her face hidden in shadow, but Elin felt her presence, heavy and inevitable, like a weight pressing against her chest, squeezing the air from her lungs, stealing her breath, her thoughts, her will. Stop, Elin whispered, her voice trembling, her flashlight shaking in her hand, its beam catching the edge of the woman's dress, tattered and stained, its edges fraying like smoke, like a wound in the air. Please, tell me what you are. Tell me what you did to Lila. The woman didn't answer. She just walked, her steps pulling Elin deeper into the forest, where the air grew colder, the fog denser, the metallic scent overwhelming, choking her, drowning her, pulling her under. Elin's legs moved of their own accord, her mind screaming to turn back, but her body refused, drawn forward by a force stronger than fear, stronger than reason, a force that felt like fate, like guilt, like Lila, like a promise she'd made and couldn't break. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches curling like fingers, their shadows twisting into shapes, Faces with hollow eyes, hands with too many fingers, mouths that whispered her name, Lila's name, Hans's name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. The ground beneath her feet felt wrong, soft and pulsing, as if it were alive, as if it were bleeding, as if it were waiting. The fog thickened, its tendrils curling around her, pulling at her, slowing her, whispering words she couldn't hear, words that weren't words, words that were wounds. Chapter 11. Into the reversal. The forest gave way to the pale field, a barren expanse where the fog was thickest, a wall of white that seemed to breathe, its tendrils curling around Elin's ankles, her wrists, her throat, cold and alive, pulling at her, slowing her, claiming her. Time felt wrong here. Leaves rose from the ground, curling back onto branches, their edges glowing faintly in the moonlight, their veins pulsing like veins in a living thing, their colors bleeding into each other, wrong and alive. Blood dripped upward from gashes in the trees, pooling in the air before vanishing, a grotesque reversal that made Elin's stomach lurch, her vision swim, her mind unravel, her thoughts twisting backward, breaking apart. She saw her turning Grace ahead, still walking backward, her form sharper now, more real, her dress trailing through the fog like a wound, its fabric stained with something that wasn't mud, wasn't blood, but something worse, something alive, something that pulsed with a rhythm that matched the footsteps, the click, click, click echoing in her skull. "What are you?" Elin cried, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face, her flashlight falling to the ground, its beam spinning wildly, illuminating nothing but fog, nothing but her, nothing but the thing that walked backward. The woman stopped. Her head tilted further, and a voice came, soft and broken like glass grinding together, each word a shard in Elin's mind, cutting deeper with every syllable, drawing blood she couldn't see, blood she could feel. "I am everything you refused to face," she said, her voice reversing, the words slanting backward, echoing in Elin's skull, through her bones, through her blood, pulling at her thoughts, unraveling them, turning them wrong. "Your guilt. Your fear. Your sister. Your mirror." Elin's knees buckled, the fog pressing against her skin, seeping into her lungs, her thoughts twisting backward, Lila's laughter becoming a scream, her sister's face blurring into something wrong, her eyes where her mouth should be, her mouth where her eyes should be, her voice whispering backward, "Elin, sorry I'm." The world inverted, sounds playing backward, her heartbeat thumping in reverse, a rhythm that pulled at her soul, turning it inside out, breaking it apart, making it wrong. The ground beneath her feet pulsed, alive and hungry, its surface rippling like water, like blood, like a mirror, reflecting her face, Lila's face, Hans's face, the faces of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned, their eyes glowing, their mouths moving in reverse, whispering her name, pulling her under. Chapter 12. The final glance. Elin couldn't stop herself, couldn't fight the pull, the need, the guilt, the promise she'd made to Lila, to herself, to the fog that watched, to the field that waited. She turned to look. Her turning Grace stood before her, her face a mirror of Elin's own, but wrong, horribly wrong. A nightmare made flesh, a reflection turned inside out. Eyes where lips should be, lips where eyes should belong, the features shifting, twisting, becoming Lila's, then Elin's again, then something else entirely, an amalgamation of guilt and fear, a mirror of every secret she'd buried, every moment she'd looked away, every sin she'd refused to face. The woman's eyes, wrong inverted, locked onto hers, glowing with a light that wasn't there. A light that burned, that saw her, that knew her, that wanted her, that was her. Elin screamed, her mind splintering as the world turned inside out, the fog closing in, a suffocating tide, its tendrils curling around her, pulling her under, drowning her in a sea of white, of blood, of time that moved backward. Her body twisted, her spine bending against her will, a sickening crack echoing in her skull as her head turned backward, her bones grinding, her muscles tearing, her vision reversing, the world spinning, unraveling, breaking apart. The last thing she saw was her own face, reversed, staring back at her, its lips moving in reverse, whispering words she couldn't understand, words that weren't hers, words that belonged to Lila, to her turning grace, to the village that had turned its back and paid the price, to the fog that watched, to the field that waited, to the thing that walked backward through time, through guilt, through her. The fog swallowed her scream, her body, her soul, and the pale field was silent, the grass still, the trees bleeding upward, the air heavy with the scent of blood, sharp and fresh, like a wound that wouldn't close, like a promise that couldn't be broken. Chapter 13 Backstep. Isaac sat in his studio, his brush moving in reverse, each stroke pulling paint backward across the canvas, as if undoing the world, as if erasing what he'd seen, what he'd survived, what he'd become. The image took shape, Elin walking backward into the fog, her face blurred, her form wrong, her dress trailing like a wound, its fabric stained with something that wasn't blood, wasn't mud, but something worse, something alive, something that pulsed with a rhythm that matched the footsteps, the click, click, click echoing through the village, through time, through him. The canvas seemed to breathe, the fog within it moving, curling, reaching out, whispering her name, Lila's name, Hans's name, his name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. Some people return, he whispered, his voice barely audible, his hands trembling as he set the brush down, his eyes fixed on the canvas, on Ellen's blurred face, her eyes where her mouth should be, her mouth where her eyes should be, her lips moving in reverse, whispering words he couldn't hear, words he didn't want to hear. But only in the wrong direction. Only as something else. He hung the canvas on the wall, next to the others, hundreds of faces, all turned, all trapped in her turning grace's endless walk, their eyes glowing, their mouths moving in reverse, whispering words no one could understand, words that weren't words, words that were wounds. The room was silent, but the fog outside thickened, its tendrils curling against the windows, searching for a way in, whispering his name, Ellen's name, Lila's name, the names of everyone who'd followed, everyone who'd turned. The footsteps began again, reversing through the walls, through the village, through time, a rhythm that never stopped, a rhythm that called, that pulled, that promised. Click, click, click. Isaac's hand twitched, reaching for the brush, but he stopped, his eyes fixed on the mirror above the door, its surface rippling, its reflection wrong. Not his face, not Ellen's, not Lila's, but something else, something blurred, something walking backward, its head tilted, its eyes where its mouth should be, its mouth where its eyes should be, its lips moving in reverse, whispering his name, calling him to follow. He turned away, his breath ragged, his heart pounding, but the footsteps grew louder, closer, reversing through the walls, through his skull, through his soul, pulling at him, urging him to step into the fog, to follow her, to see her face, to become what he'd painted, what he'd feared, what he'd always known he'd become. The mirror glowed faintly, its surface rippling like water, like blood, like time, and for a moment, he thought he saw Ellen, not on the canvas, but in the village square, walking backward, her dress trailing through the fog, her head tilted, her face blurred but alive, her eyes glowing, her lips moving in reverse, whispering words he couldn't hear, words that weren't hers, words that were hers, words that called him, that called everyone, that called the village itself. Was she gone, or had she returned, turned wrong, alive in a way that wasn't living, walking in a direction that wasn't forward, wasn't backward, but something else, something eternal, something inevitable? He didn't know. He didn't want to know. But the footsteps continued, click, 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 reversing through the fog, through the village, through time, through him, and the mirror watched, waiting, whispering, promising that one day he'd follow, that one day he'd see her face, that one day he'd turn.